Hey, everybody, and welcome to another Outsourcing Oasis. I'm your host, Charles Max Wood, and we are here with David Hemmett.
Hey, nice to be here again.
Yep, and we have a guest this week, Deb Cinkus.
Close enough. Deb Cinkus.
All right. You want to introduce yourself real quick? Let people know who you are and what Polished Geek does and all that stuff.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. So Polished Geek is a small boutique kind of web company. I use that with the most loving way. Boutique as in small but mighty, you know. And what we do is a lot of like website support and maintenance. That's kind of like one of the core things that we do. But we really do a lot more to help our customers make their websites more effective and more powerful for their business. So we do marketing automation. We do conversion rate optimization work. We also do dynamic website personalization, where the website can adapt and show different content based on who's looking at it and what their interests are, things like that.
Resolve Digital helps build, optimize, and maintain e-commerce, SaaS, and other products built on Ruby on Rails. They can help build new applications from scratch, rescue projects in bad shape, provide ongoing development and maintenance for existing projects, augment your existing team with experienced Rails developers. They also specialize in Solidus and Spree commerce solutions. Go check them out at resolve.digital.
Great. Can you tell us about the name, Polished Geek?
Oh, that actually is a very deliberate name. It didn't just sound cool. My business partner is the geek of Polished Geek, and I am the polish of Polished Geek. And you know, when we formed the company back in 2009, so we're well over a decade now at this point, we knew we wanted to be a little different. Like we knew we were going to be doing web development. We knew we were going to be doing custom stuff, but we really wanted to always be keeping in mind, what's the business value of what we're delivering? What is the purpose of what we're delivering? So we were never just people who, you know, you gave a spec to and we went off and built it and that was it. We were always making sure that we understood, how can we make it better for the business? How can we make it more effective? And so Polished Geek just kind of ended up becoming the name that stuck with us of, you know, it's geeky, but we make sure everything is very polished. Quality is very important to us.
Mm-hmm. What's your background then? Is it business or something else?
My background, I worked for many years in the world of corporate enterprise. I don't know if either one of you remember a company called Northern Telecom, Nortel, from the telecommunication days. I used to work there for many, many years, and I was a project manager in the global services division. And then I spent a long stint as a contract project manager for a company that did software that was used by a lot of big corporations. So I spent time working with companies like Sherwin-Williams, ABN AMRO, Banco Popular down in Puerto Rico. I spent a lot of time down there. So I had a lot of wide industry experience doing all kinds of business process development and putting things into place to make our software again work with their business. And then the last corporate stint that I had was working at Fidelity Investments, and I was a director of project management for internal projects. So I did a lot of large-scale, multi-million-dollar projects. Nothing like what I do now, but you know, these are all skills that have been very handy to me in running Polished Geek and in delivering projects for my companies that I work with, because you know, I understand how to put together a business case. I understand how to look at what the business value is and how to phase things out. And I'm used to working with all different types of people in development, programmers, business analysts, salespeople, et cetera. All of those roles were people I had to interact with for many, many years.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. One of the I guess it's a theme we touch upon fairly regularly. It's the difference between, you know, large, well-funded projects and then smaller projects. And it seems like you've had a chance to be on both sides. Mm-hmm. What would you say is transferable, and what would you say, you know, needs to be adapted? Are there any things that stand out to you?
That is an excellent question. Let's see. So, I mean, other than the obvious budget things, going 5 or 10% over a budget that is millions of dollars is pretty bad. But honestly, when you're working with a company that has that kind of money, it usually just becomes an exercise of, write up a good case for why the additional funding is needed, put it up through the right people, and eventually you get your extra million, right? Or your extra couple $100,000. It's not even 10% is not that easy if you're dealing with a company that has a $10,000 budget. That's a lot for them, because that might not be there for them. So budget wise, it's not a question of 5-10% difference being okay. It really, it's more meaningful, right? At the smaller levels, you really got to look at what you're doing there. But I would say that, on a big project, the problems, of course, are coordination. You're working with all these huge different departments. They all have competing priorities, and maybe that manager doesn't like this manager, and all those kind of things that go on in the big corporate thing. And there's politics and all of that. But in the smaller companies, you often might be working with 1 or 2 people. At some of our clients, we do have mostly B2B clients. So a lot of them, there are several contacts that we deal with. We're all in different departments. But in the end, there's usually only like 1 or 2 in each department that we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a large group. And it's usually a little more clear who gets to say, and they don't tend to do things as much by committee, which makes it a little easier to get a decision. Right? When I need a decision, and I need a decision about some functionality that's going to maybe make it into this phase versus that phase, or we're going to take this marketing approach, or we're going to use this copy or whatever, I usually have one person I can go to, one person who has gotten to know me, we've gotten to know them, and we can make the case persuasively of why we think this recommendation should hold. And generally, we don't have to listen to, well, let me go off and talk to everybody and I'll get back to you in 2 weeks at the next quarterly meeting or whatever. It's usually a decision is pretty quick. So there's a little bit more just a fluid kind of work style that you get because you have less people to deal with and there's less politics and baggage because there's not all this hierarchy. And I have to say that I like that. I like the fact that we can get in there and get things done and talk to people and really get to know the client on a deeper level. And when you're working with big enterprise, it's more difficult. And then people move around a lot. They get promoted, transferred, whatever. And so, you get working with somebody and they're gone. But you work with a small business. A lot of times we're working directly with owners. They're not usually going anywhere. Maybe one of their people will move on eventually, but a lot of times the core group that hires us and chooses to work with us is who we get to keep working with. And that's also nice too.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem you're mentioning. So I remember one particular client that we worked with at Blue Coating, and they hired us. Actually, Charles, we heard from them because they were listening to Ruby Rogues. Somebody in their team was listening to Ruby Rogues. It's another show that Charles manages, and so I think it was their director of engineering reached out to me, and he said, "Hey, we're looking to staff our team." And they needed a couple people back then, and the team that we built for them grew to like 8 people. But what happened was we kept getting handed off to other people, right? So. First, so we had an accounts manager that would deal with somebody. And then, after a month, we'd send the time report and we get an email back and say, oh, this person is no longer in charge of this project. He's been moved to this other department. Please reach out to person B. And then, a month later, that would happen again. And at the end, we had like 5 different contacts within the company, and 2 developers were under one guy and 3 were under the other. And we never knew what was going on. And it was difficult to get feedback. It was difficult to set up meetings with them. And especially because the work that we do, at least through Blue Coating, it was staff augmentation, right? So we weren't involved in the day-to-day operation. It was more of finding the right people and then making sure they continued the work. And so we weren't having weekly conversations with the manager in charge of each specific project, but it was rather, we'd check in once every 2 weeks, just to make sure things are going well. And then, once every month, we'd like to have a little bit of a deeper conversation. But those were always difficult to set up because, we weren't providing them all that much value directly, at least to that manager. And so he just wanted to deal with the developers, and we needed to make sure everything was okay. It was kind of tough in that sense. But then, we also find that in small companies, sometimes the opposite happens, which is the owner does everything and the owner is too busy.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've come across that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've come across that.
I see that too, where I'm at. Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
So I do podcast sponsorships is usually what I'm selling. And yeah, we'll send the invoice in and it's, so-and-so's not with the company anymore. And, we'll get handed off to somebody else. Oh, well, we hired a new CMO and podcasting's not part of our strategy this quarter. So, we're not going to pay the invoice and, because I make people pay up front. So if they don't pay, I'm not out anything except for money that I might have been planning on. But yeah, it happens more than you think. And different companies at different levels have that problem or not, So yeah, or I've been delegated to somebody else and yeah, they're busy or anyway.
Yeah. At the agency level, we've had projects that maybe haven't been lost, but they've gone down significantly precisely because of staff rotation on our client side, right? So we had a great at Resolve Digital, we do a lot of e-commerce, and so we generally deal with VP of marketing, digital marketing manager, that kind of role. So we had a great digital marketing manager, 2-year relationship, everything's great. One day she sends a notice and she said, "Hey, I'm quitting, and this will be your new point of contact." And it seems like the company was undergoing some significant changes at the time. And like every 2 months or 3 months, we'd be told, "Oh, this is the new person in that role," and then that person would move. And what happened was, we went from having a steady project with a lot of hours every month to nothing because nobody knew what was going on the client side. And so we couldn't get anything done. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely feel for you with that. We've seen stuff like that too, that the turnover leads to, the new person. They're like, "I didn't choose you. I have my own way that I want to choose to spend my budget," or maybe they'd rather hire in-house. And so they want to make a case for that. So then they start using you less and less, or they start just literally giving you less direction and less stuff. So they can kind of point to, it's just easier if we work with someone in-house. I have to say though that sometimes it works out when someone leaves, because we've had one client who was at one company that is still a client of ours today. And this was like 5 years ago, and he worked there for several years. He's the one who brought us in over there. He left that company eventually. And after about 6 months or so, he suddenly called us again out of the blue and went, "Hey, I'm at this new company and I want to hire you." And he brought us in over there too. And that client is still a client of ours. And he's left that one. So now I'm just waiting for the third phone call. I'm just hoping, eventually. But I mean, it can happen, right? If someone's a really big fan of you, they know what you're like. I mean, we've had the comment made of, "You guys set the bar for how well I expect a vendor to work with me, how well I expect them to partner with me," because we really don't just throw that word partnership around. Like, we want to be a seamless extension of their business. We want to be their remote web, people, right? We are remote, but we want to make it super easy for them to communicate with us, super easy for us to do the right work that they need done. And we work very hard to go above and beyond. We're always giving suggestions, feedback. And if I don't hear from a client for about a week or two, I'm going to reach out to them. "Hey, you haven't been using your care plan as much," or, "Hey, we've got some work we have on the table that we believe should be done next month inside of your marketing retainer. And here's what we suggest." And then, we proactively go after them, because you're right, they get busy. But the last thing you want is for them to turn back and look at 3 months of you not talking to them because you're like, "Woo, money's coming in and they didn't ask for anything. Awesome." That's not being a good partner, and that's not going to keep you at that client long term, and that's not going to make that client successful. So, I mean, I do think it's on us as companies that people outsource work to go after pursuing that conversation when they start to not utilize you as much.
Yes.
Now, ours is one of those things where they're not paying by the hour. We don't do that. So they pay a monthly thing, and they get a certain level of service depending upon what they're paying for. But there is none of this, "Oh, this month we only need 10 hours. This month we need 40 hours. We don't have that kind of relationship with them. So genuinely, if a month goes by and they don't use much of their service, they're out a month where they could have been doing something to get their marketing ahead, something to get their marketing in a better position to compete against their competitors, but it's just been lost. It's not like they saved any money. So we proactively will go to our clients and say, here's what we suggest. Here's how we think we can bring you some value this month if they haven't actively asked for something.
It's funny you talk about that because, and I've had the same experience, right? Where when I was freelancing or, sometimes I was just freelancing myself and sometimes I was freelancing and I had subcontractors that worked for me, right? And so they'd hire our whole team. But yeah, I had some folks that would come back and they'd move on to a new company and they'd hire us to come in and work with them there. And then we'd have other folks that I'd wind up talking to and trying to get to hire us for the first time. And they'd be like, well, I've worked with outsourced companies like you before, freelancers like you before, and it didn't go well. And so I'm really worried that this isn't going to work out. And I mean, it's hard, right? It's hard to say, okay, well, we're different and here's why. And eventually I wound up outlining sort of what you talked about there, right? We're going to communicate. We're going to communicate this often. We're going to communicate in these ways. We're going to make sure you have all the information you need and on and on and on. And by having those kinds of conversations, I was able to close them. And then as I delivered on those things, yeah, some people were really good at following up and getting back to us and knowing what we were doing and knowing what, and some people were really not. But at the end of the day, when they came back and were unhappy, we could ask, well, have you been getting our emails? Type. Yep. Oh, I see. Have you been getting our messages in Slack or, text messages or whatever we worked out, right? Oh yeah, I did see those, right? And so then it's okay, well, we're really trying to make sure that this is successful. And then you have another conversation, you kind of train them to pick up on that stuff.
Yeah. So I had not a funny experience, but I had an interesting experience just a couple days ago where one of our older clients that we haven't been doing much work for reached out and said, hey, are you guys still working with us? The invoices are really small. And I said, yeah, back in December, you asked us to cancel your retainer and you wanted to do an hourly engagement. And then you haven't asked for any work. And so, and apparently, and she had work to do. And she had apparently, just been busy and didn't reach out to us. And it had and my team was busy with other stuff and we didn't reach out to them because they had specifically said, we don't want a retainer. We just want to call you whenever we need work. And so, yeah, it's a tough situation. And Deb, I was just thinking about what you said. You don't do hourly. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I'd like to think about that from, the business, the client standpoint, and also from our standpoint. It's something I've been tempted to do. We have clients that their business slows down and especially now, we've had a couple say, hey, our business is slowing down. Can we cancel our retainer and just have you guys nearby if we need you? And we're usually open to that. My development team and especially our director of engineering hates it. His position is that makes it much more difficult to work with these clients, and it's much more difficult to allocate resources and make sure we can get to them in time. Can you just bring me retainers only? And my position, on the business development side is, but we want to take care of these people who have been our customers for the past few years. So, can you tell us a little bit about your decision?
Can I jump in here real quick? Because this is an open debate on the Freelancer Show, just so you know.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Hourly versus not hourly. And it's funny because when we started out, we were very pro hourly. And then we got Jonathan Stark on and he started convincing us to do value-based pricing. Yeah. And now we have, so a lot of us are on board with the value-based pricing, but we have one or two people that are kind of on that weird place where hourly has really worked for them and it's been a lot easier for them to manage. And so I'm curious where you've seen the trade-offs.
You're going to have to tell us about value-based pricing.
Yeah, I know Jonathan Stark as well. I'm also someone who follows him, so I know who you're talking about, and he is very convincing. So I know it doesn't show up on a podcast, but when David was talking there about, that it's harder to work with that kind of client, and hourly is not as fulfilling and not as easy to manage as retainer, I was vigorously nodding my head yes. And that's really what it comes down to. Okay, so from an agency side, we can look at the perspective of, hey, recurring revenue is super important as a lifeblood of your agency, right? Assuming someone isn't going to cancel or something like that, within a reasonable way how much you're going to get next month and the month after that and the month after that. So that's helpful for a business, right? You can plan, you can grow, you can invest in your team, those kind of things. That you've got this base amount of core revenue you can count on. And then maybe you do special ad hoc projects or bespoke work or whatever, in addition to that. But the retainer really is a good stability. And I don't even know who said it first, but somebody said something that's always stuck in my mind of, you owe it to your clients to stay in business. Like having recurring revenue helps me as a business stay in business to serve my clients. It doesn't help anyone if I have to go through a feast or famine cycle of, well, this month suddenly nobody needed anything, so we don't have any revenue, and now we're having to cut back, or I'm having to let someone go who's worked with us for 4 years. These are not healthy things for me when I'm delivering them to the client, right? I can't deliver the best service without the best team as a service agency. Now, that's all from the agency point of view. From the client point of view, I know some people are tempted by they want to pay hourly because they're like, oh, well, then I only pay for what I use. But, it makes clients, unless clients are so, let's ignore the COVID thing going on right now, right? I know everyone is having financial challenges with this for the most part. Unless you make sanitizer, in which case you're fine. If you're Lysol or somebody, you're okay. But I mean, pretty much everybody's having trouble. Let's ignore that. It's unusual, unprecedented event. Let's just talk about normally. So normally, if a customer puts their work into hourly, they sit there and they think about the money every single time they're going to make a decision. Do I really want this? Is it worth 3 hours? Is it going to be 6 hours? And then as an agency, that client is always going to be asking me, how long is this going to take? What's the price tag going to be on this, et cetera? And so we collectively, them and us, spend time talking about how much is this going to cost? And I would so much rather have the conversation about how much revenue is this going to get you? What is this going to deliver to your business? Is this going to save you money? Is it going to automate a process? Is it going to get rid of this nagging thing you've always wanted to get rid of that you wish it could be better about how your systems run and communicate? Is it something that is setting the stage for long-term growth? Let's look at how we can make your business improve instead of making decisions based on hourly numbers. And it's easy for me to say that when I do virtually everything retainer-wise, because a client can be on a couple of different retainer levels. So it's not just one. So there are some levels. And what I always tell clients, and when they work with me, they realize I'm telling the truth. I'm telling it like it is, which is, I'm not going to sit here and count up your hours. But if after a couple of months, I don't feel like you're asking for support at the level you and I talked about, there's some numbers in the contract. They have to be there, right? The contract is what people pull out when things don't go well. If it goes well, we should have had a good conversation. We should say, this is what to expect. This is the service that you're going to get. We write it all up. We put it in writing legally. We sign it. We put it in the drawer, and we hopefully never need to touch it again. Because the only time we should have to go to that contract is when something's not going well, and for somebody, right? It's the only time we should have to do that. So when a customer is signed up for a certain level, if after a few months they feel like, wow, this is not the level that we agreed to, this is not the level of service, we're giving them far more than what they're buying, it's not fair and equitable, then I'm going to have a conversation with them. We're going to just talk. We're going to get on the Zoom call and we're going to have a chat. And I'm going to say, look, this is kind of like what's been going on. And I have good records about what's been going on. But again, I'm not going to do it by hours. I'm not going to sit down and go, oh, your contract, your retainer was up to 25 hours a month and you use 35. You know what? There are times when some months people use more than others. And the way I feel like it is as long as that wave goes up and down and around that middle line, and it comes out kind of even where they're getting good value and we're getting good value and we're able to be profitable and they're able to grow their business, then everyone's happy. And so, it really frees us up from having to have discussions and justifications about why something took 4 hours instead of 2. And these are just not places I want to spend my time. And these aren't the kind of value-added conversations I think I should be having. So I really like working with clients who want to focus on what is it we're going to get done together. And, that's what we do.
That's not interesting.
I don't know. My brother-in-law said that the work you did should have only taken you a half hour.
I've heard that.
And it took you 3 hours. And so, I'm only going to pay you for a half hour.
Yeah, well, yeah, and exactly. And if I'm not working hourly, that conversation doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at all. And again, though, you have to, if you're going to work this way with a client, you have to be willing to take the responsibility of, let's proactively go back to them if they aren't using it at the right level. If we really look at them and go, we haven't really done much for them, and they're paying for a level of service that they just don't need or whatever, you have to also be willing to go back to them and go, how can we make this more valuable for you? How about we do something, for free for you? Free being, of course, you've been paying for it, but you know what I mean? Like, let's proactively suggest something they haven't even asked for. And we do that. We will, we will occasionally go to clients and say that. There's a client who's been on care plans with us for about 4 years. And our care plans specifically exclude doing major rework, like completely redesigning your whole site. That's a whole separate project. That's not ongoing monthly kind of stuff. But, there was a point where she'd been a client for a very long time, and it frankly needed a refresh. And the minute any of that kind of came up in conversation, we said, yeah, okay, we're going to do that. We won't charge any extra, Yeah. And so that was one way that I rewarded that longevity of being a client with us. But a new client that came and signed in March, and then April turns around and goes, by the way, now I want you to do a full redesign. No, a retainer package that doesn't have an hours, strict hours accounting and limit is not a way to get a bunch of free work.
Yeah.
It has to be fair. And if they don't feel like we're being fair with them, I want them to tell me, and we'll have a conversation, and vice versa. I will tell them.
So that's really interesting because I'm thinking about it from the client's perspective. So we do a bunch of different work, right? And so I've come across a whole series of these problems. And, the hourly ones are the ones we dislike the most because they'll call you Friday and say, this has gone terribly wrong. Can you get it done now? And we're like, no, we've planned the week around a whole bunch of other retainers that we have, and they need constant work. And so then you have an unhappy client that needs to wait until Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever, so we can get to that thing. That's one case. On the staff augmentation side of things, the issue we've seen is we occasionally did agreements where we'd say, hey, you're going to have a full-time person. This is full-time is 160 hours a month for us, and we'll charge you X per hour, right? And what would happen is suddenly they'd start slowing down, right? And so 120 hours, 110 hours, and then this suddenly doesn't make sense to us because our margins aren't that high on that kind of work. And you reach out to the client and they say, oh yeah, we're just going through a slow phase. And so then we started thinking, well, maybe we need to change our retainer so that they say, we'll charge you 160 hours and you can do less if you want, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But then I'm thinking about it from the client's perspective. And one thing I've come across as a client, I occasionally also buy services, is as long as I feel like I'm getting value, I don't care what you're doing. Right? We have employees and contractors that are just really good at what they do. And I don't care to look at their time logs. I don't care what they're doing. I'm getting results and I'm paying for them. I'm happy. When I start feeling like I need to know what they spent their last 8 hours on, that probably means that I'm not feeling happy with the results. Right? And so maybe it's time to reevaluate the relationship. And oftentimes it just comes down to communication. The person or the team might be doing great work, but they're not telling me about it. And so all I'm seeing is invoices coming in and work not progressing the way I expect it to. So that's something to take care of.
Are you stuck at home climbing the walls when you should be hanging out with the community at the latest conference to get canceled? Are you wondering where to hear your JavaScript heroes like Amy Knight and Douglas Crockford and Chris Heilman? After the cancellations, I decided to put on a JavaScript conference for you, online. I invited my favorite folks from around the web and got them to come speak at an online event just for you. Go to jsremoteconf.com and check out our speakers and schedule. The conference is on May 14th and 15th. The call for proposals is open until March 31st. Come join us at an online conference that we guarantee will keep you safe and keep you informed. jsremoteconf.com.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Yeah, I would prefer to have people on retainer and be able to be flexible of, what, I know something that's coming up that we need to prepare for. We know that there's something in the next month or two that has to get done, like a major system update, or maybe we have some work that we can work on ahead of time on speccing out something that, they've talked about wanting to build. Maybe we can do a little competitive research for them. There are things that gives us a latitude to do to better contribute to being a successful partner with them and helping their business grow. That, when you're by the hour, the client's going to turn to you and go, I didn't ask you to do that, so I don't want to pay for it. Well, if you're on a retainer and I know that my guy is not getting a lot of requests from you, I'll tell him to do something else on your behalf. I'll tell him to go out and do some competitive research. I'll tell him to go out and do some SEO stuff. I'll tell him to start doing some testing on maybe one of the new pieces of development that we normally could have waited a few weeks to do, but we'll go ahead and accelerate it and bring it up faster. I'll make sure that something is being done for their behalf, but because the price doesn't change to them, they're paying the same thing every single month. There's none of those conversations of, well, I didn't think this needed to be done. I didn't ask you to do it, so I don't want to pay for it. And then during the months that they ask us for extra, okay, so this is something where, again, a client has to be established and it has to be somebody that, you have a good working relationship with. You can't just say, you can't have someone sign on next week and then do this. But like when this whole COVID thing started happening, like we have a couple of clients that are having to practically reinvent themselves. Right? They're having to completely shift their business models to online. Their revenue streams are impacted significantly. And I had one of them that's worked with us now for 2 years. We've been on they're on basically our flagship program, conversion rate optimization. We do A/B testing for them. We do a lot of stuff for them. And they said to me, hey, we're getting a lot of pressure from the executives. This is a big problem for us. What will we have to pay you if we need you to work over a weekend or something like that? And I said to them, under normal circumstances, nights and weekends are charged extra. You get 24/7, 365 for emergencies being your website's down, it got hacked or something like that. I always tell customers, if you hire us and something happens to your website in the middle of my Christmas dinner, I'm going to get up and we're going to take care of it. Okay. So you have 365, but just asking us to add new products to the site or asking us to change the homepage or whatever, that's not an emergency, right? So normally we wouldn't do that nights or weekends. And I said to them, this is not normal circumstances. We really value you as a client. We know what you're going through. We're not going to charge you any extra. And so we have actually put in a decent amount of weekend work and some nights to help them get their business completely shifted to this new model that they've got to do. And they really appreciated that. We want to see them get out of this hole that COVID has thrown everybody into. I can do that because we have this long-standing trust with this client that they're not going to take advantage of it. They're not going to abuse it. But I mean, that isn't something normally that we can do. I certainly can't afford to be paying my people overtime to do that and not charging a client, right?
Yeah, we'll do that occasionally. When we have a client that's going through a financial difficulty and they still need to get something done because it has to happen, either we'll do it up front for them and charge them later, or we'll just do it for free if they've been around for a long time. Not to do it. But I guess it's on a case by case basis. You have to decide what you want to absorb or not. And the way I see it is, if we keep one of these clients happy, they'll eventually come back when things get better. Yeah. So Deb, last time we spoke, you were telling me about how you ended up in Guatemala. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was telling you much earlier about, my original days in the enterprise world, right? Working at big companies and everything. And then, and then now I have this small company, right? Less than 10 people. And most of us, what we kind of considered our core team, we were all physically located in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. That's where we were. I had raised my children in that town. And so we'd all lived there for a very long time. And we were always 100% virtual office. So we never had a physical office, and we never actually deliberately sought local customers in that area. We always served worldwide, primarily United States, but we've had customers from Malaysia and France and everything else. So we were already kind of mostly used to working remote, and everybody would come over and sit in the house and work. We actually had a couple of rooms in our house actually set up as, home offices with actual office furniture and everything else. And every now and then people would be kind of stir crazy. They're we need to change the scenery. And there were a couple of places we liked to go work. We drag all of our laptops to Starbucks, of course. But we also like sometimes we had this really nice Indian restaurant nearby that had a great lunch buffet, and they completely humored us. They let us come in and get a big table, and we'd work around. We got Indian food and we talk and whatever. They just loved seeing us come in. But anyway, one day, we're sitting there at a coffee shop, and somebody says, "Okay, so we have these awesome jobs. We can do them anywhere. It literally doesn't matter where we are as long as we have internet. So why is the most exciting place we're going Starbucks in Cary, North Carolina? Like, why aren't we going somewhere more interesting?" And I think we were just all at the right point in our lives to go, yeah, let's actually talk about that. Nobody had kids in school. Nobody had anything that they just felt like they couldn't make a change in their life. So there was no like barriers to that. So the whole group the 6 of us, really started talking in earnest about this. And we looked at all kinds of things that we could do. Like we looked at just going on the road for a while. We actually looked into how much it costs to rent a tour bus. And I'm really glad we didn't do that because that would have been insane.
Nice.
But we looked at that. And then we just really started saying, why don't we look at like doing something which to us at the time was crazy? Why don't we look at living abroad for a while, become digital nomads in the real sense. And so we had a bunch of, we looked at a bunch of different countries and everything else. Guatemala won because it is easy to get, back to the States. It's not like you're Europe or whatever. The time zone is kind of lined up halfway decent, right? And then cost of living, it certainly was a consideration. And then we actually knew someone in Guatemala. So it was like one of the only countries where we actually knew someone on the ground in the country that if we had a problem, we could go help. And then we chose what is a pretty touristy area. So there was a decent amount of English. It's not a huge amount of English, but there was a decent amount of English. So we're not 100% nuts. We didn't just move. We did bring everyone down for a month. So we came down for a month. And we stayed here, and we rented a house. Because if you stay in a hotel or something, that's not like real life. So we stayed in a house and we explored the area and we saw what real life would be like. And we dealt with the whole language frustration and all of that. And everyone loved it. Like everybody was like, okay, yeah, I really want to do this. I really want to live here. So we all went back at the end of the month and we all began to get rid of all the things we had to shed to move. I sold the house. I sold the car. I sold almost all my furniture. I gave a bunch away to family, donated a whole bunch of stuff. I basically got myself down to a couple of suitcases. That was my life. A couple of suitcases. There's still a few things stored in a smallish kind of box in my daughter's house. That's about it. Few things I didn't want to bring with me, but they were like mementos, like pictures and stuff like that. The others all, canceled their apartment leases or sold their stuff, sold their cars, everything else. And we took 6 people and 4 cats and went and lived in one house for a year. And the year was enough. It was a lot of togetherness. And that was kind of tough. And I kind of think that you probably could have made a TV show out of it, kind of like Silicon Valley. You definitely could have done something like that because there were definitely times it was pretty amusing. Times when we had all kinds of crazy things happen with cats because houses are very open here in Guatemala and like cats kept escaping and showing up in other people's houses and all kinds of stuff that we had to deal with. But at any rate, we all really liked it and we all did the year in the same house. And then after that, we said, yep, that's enough togetherness. And a couple of people were mostly done with living outside the U.S. They were like, I'm kind of over this now. This has been fun, but I'm ready to go back to the United States and drive my SUV and have malls and more than 2 brands of ketchup to choose from in the store. Because it's just things you just can't get here. And, the rest of us really liked it. And like, I never intended to stay this long. I've just really loved it here. And so we're still here in Antigua. A couple of people live at the lake. A couple of people live in Antigua. But I mean, we can do our jobs anywhere. Really no reason why we can't do them from wherever we want.
Well, that's an interesting subject. How do your customers feel about that? So is that ever a sticking point in the conversation? And I'm asking because I operate a remote team too. And I sometimes feel, we have a team that's spread across Latin America. We have one person in Spain as well. And our clients will often ask, like, where are we based? And I'm wondering if that's, relevant to them at all. And we feel it's not. But I feel like our clients sometimes do. Yeah. Do you ever get that feeling?
I think it is relevant where you're based, but that doesn't mean that's where you physically have to be. And I say that because we do have clients who want to know that when they sign a contract with us, that they're signing a contract with a properly registered tax-paying LLC in North Carolina, and they are. That is what we're beholden to. We are a North Carolina business. All of our banking is there. All of our servers that we lease from different data centers are all in the U.S. We don't have anything else. It's just the people that are working remotely. So the two things I found that clients care about is, one, legally, where are you? Right? Okay. They want to know that they have a contract with a U.S. based entity. And then secondly, they just want to know that they can have good communication with you. By good communication, I don't just mean that they can call on the phone and you'll answer, because you can. We have a 919 phone number, rings us down here. It's not just about that. It's about that we can get on the phone, we can understand each other, that we have a cultural understanding, that we certainly speak English well, that we're going to understand what they write, that it's easy to communicate with us. And that's what matters. And so generally I have found that, I'll have people call, cold leads will call sometimes on the phone and say, I found you online. I was looking around. You guys are just down the street from me. And I always go, well, not exactly. Because if you're really wanting to be able to sit down over a cup of coffee in person at that Starbucks in Cary, North Carolina, this isn't going to work. But if what you really care about is someone who gets, you and understands you as a U.S. business and understands your clientele and understands your marketing and everything else, then that's it. And so usually the minute we start explaining that, they're usually fine with it. They're talking to me. They can tell I'm not English is not my second language and all that. They find it's very easy to get a hold of us. They know legally they're protected because we're a U.S. company. And generally it's fine. There are a few who are like, no, I really want to be able to meet in person.
Oh yeah, we don't want to do that anyways. You're not a good fit for us.
When I was in Raleigh, that isn't really what I wanted, because the whole drive to the thing and sit for an hour and it's more effective to me. Let's get on a Zoom, and let's have a conversation. Let's go through some visuals. Let's screen share and stuff like that. People who feel like they cannot work unless they are face to face. And I think nowadays, even those people might be having a little bit of a change of heart, but people who feel like that's important, that they have to have that to work with somebody, are probably not going to be a good fit for us. And they wouldn't have been a good fit years ago when we were located in North Carolina. And they're certainly not a good fit for us now. But they do ask and they do care. There were one or two clients who didn't take it well, who felt like, oh my gosh, you've gone offshore. That's horrible and unpatriotic. there were a couple who didn't, but I've always been very, very candid with people. This is what our situation is. This is where we are. This is who we are. My people are U.S. people. I do have some employees in the Philippines. They are people who work directly for us. They've worked with us for years. I don't have companies that I send stuff to that I have no idea who's going to work on your thing next week. It is dedicated people that work exclusively with us. And so that really helps. But pretty much the main people who talk to the clients are myself, my business partner, a couple of the other people who are US based people. They get on the phone, they get on a Zoom, and they realize that there's no problem working with us. It doesn't matter where we physically are.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the Philippines. We've had a few people on the show already mention the Philippines as places that they've hired people at. And I'm wondering how that happened. How did the Philippines, which is not a very large country, become that, hub? But yeah, that's a pretty interesting story of how you got there. Charles, have you had I wanted to hear from your perspective. I know you did a lot of freelancing work. I don't know if you still do, but I'm sure not all of your clients were, near you.
Yeah.
You had people across the U.S. as clients, right?
Yeah, I had one client that was he had one of his daughters lived here in the same city I live in, right? And so he would fly out every month and he would take me to lunch and we'd sit down and we'd hash stuff out. I had him pretty early on I had a couple in San Francisco Bay Area, a couple in like New York area. I had one from Hong Kong, which is kind of interesting because they were offshoring
to the U.S.
I had a couple in Europe, again, that were, offshoring to here. But again, a lot of them I met because they listened to the podcast. I'd get on and I'd say, hey, my contract is ending. And they'd be like, oh, we got to get him. Yeah. I mean, some of them were kind of hard to figure out because, banking across borders is tricky sometimes.
Oh, I know. We spent, I think, $700 on wire transfers last month.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've also had people work for me from Brazil, Jamaica, Argentina. Argentina was super hard to figure out.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd get it figured out and then they would change the rules.
I've had that happen too with Argentina.
Yeah, that happened twice with us. We finally wound up using Zoom, but then even that didn't work. XOOM, not ZOOM. That finally stopped working at some point. I mean, it was messy. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, most of the people that I talked to either spoke good English or were American expatriates that would hire me if they were outside the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how did the rate situation play in there? One thing I've found is when companies are looking to hire people outside the U.S., there's generally a cost component to that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's of course places that are more expensive than the U.S., but in my mind, the U.S. tends to be one of the places with the higher developer rates. And so it's interesting that you say, you had clients in other parts of the world that were hiring. I guess Hong Kong is not cheap either, and probably not the parts of Europe you're talking about.
Well, and I was trading on my reputation as much as I was trading on, hey, I'm a U.S. developer. And so when they would hire me, they were hiring me because they knew who I was. So it was a little bit different situation, right? They weren't looking for a U.S. developer. They were looking for somebody they could count on. And because of the podcast, they knew that they could count on me. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys get any pushback on rates, Deb, around that subject?
Well, no. I mean, we really don't, because again, people aren't hiring us because we're outside.
Right. Yeah.
They're hiring us because we're us, and because
they don't know you're outside for the most part. Yeah.
Well, no, I make sure everyone knows that. And I think it's important to be honest. I don't want someone to feel tricked. So, yeah. I mean, there's a couple of times where I have conversations on the phone with leads, and for whatever reason, it doesn't come up. And we get toward the end of the conversation. And if we just haven't touched on the location issue, I will say, look, hey, there's something I need to discuss with you, and I want to make sure you're going to be okay with this, that this is fine with you and you don't consider it a work problem. And I explain to them where we are, what we do, that we are legally and our status and everything is North Carolina based business, et cetera, et cetera. But physically not located there, working abroad. And, like I said, 99% of the time clients are fine with it, but they're not hiring us because they're looking outside the U.S.
Right. Yeah.
They're hiring us. I don't even want to say in spite of it. The people who hire us, it is not important to them. It is you're the one they want to hire, just like what Charles was saying there. They wanted to hire him. They didn't really care where he was, right? They cared about, I want to hire you. And that's the whole point. But I do think it's important that they need to know, they do need to know so that, I don't know if there's ever some sort of issue that I have to deal with, a volcano goes off and or whatever, or what I don't want to have. I'm not like one of those call centers, the call centers that you call and they lie and they in Florida and they're not. It's funny, I was having a phone call with somebody. I'm not even going to mention the company. I won't out them, but I will tell you that I was having a phone call and I was talking to customer service rep, and the guy was great. He was really nice. His English had an accent to it, but he was really nice. So I kind of got the sense English wasn't his first language, but he communicated really well, no problem with anything. And we were talking about stuff, and I made some comment. I think it was in rainy season, so it had started raining. Like the sky opened and it just went nuts. And I made some comment about it. And he goes, oh, where are you? And I told him. And all along, he's having to kind of tell me he's in Florida, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, actually, I'm in Guatemala City. He's like, they have to tell people, because a lot of people are like, I want to speak to someone in the U.S. he was servicing what I needed done perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And if I have a problem with him, it isn't going to be because of what city he's calling from. It's going to be because he's not doing his job.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. And so just if for a customer, it's more important that we physically be at the same location, as them, and that we be physically at, across the same desk in the same room, then we're going to have a problem working with them no matter what, if that's what they're focused on. So, it hasn't really gotten in the way, but we don't adjust our rates for it because remember, I got U.S. people. They're still making what they used to in North Carolina or that, right? I mean, they didn't take a big cut and pay just because they're down here. So, and even though Philippines is a very reasonable price, if you get a good person and you want to keep them, you need to pay them well, and you need to pay the legal bonuses, and you need to give them raises and et cetera, and you need to invest in them. And so just because, yes, a Philippine employee is less expensive than a U.S. employee, we're not using bottom of the rate cheap people, nor
I agree.
want to. Yeah. So, so there's that to consider as well. And those aren't our core people. Those are very important people, but the core people are all U.S.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the conversations I have to have with people sometimes, they'll reach out to us and they say, hey, we want to recruit some developers in Latin America and we want to pay well. We want to pay above, the local market rate. And I'm like, just so you know, all of the good developers in any country in Latin America are making maybe not Bay Area salaries, but they're working for U.S. companies. They're not making local rates. So you're not going to be enticing them with, 20% above whatever the local rate is.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we're kind of running over schedule here. Deb, do you have any picks that you'd like to share with the audience?
I do. I have a couple of things that, work in this world of remote working. Everybody's going to be working like us now, right? Like for at least a while, people who did or didn't want to go there are being forced to go there. So there's a few things that I think I can share. One is we made the move about a year and a half ago now to Monday.com as our project management support system. Like we had a ticket system, we had a project management system. And we said, you know what, these aren't really fitting our needs. We need stuff that we can adapt to doing conversion rate optimization work and tracking A/B tests and analysis, and then also tracking support requests. We just had a bunch of needs. So we looked at a bunch of stuff. We looked at Trello, we looked at ClickUp, we looked at Asana. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I will tell you that Monday.com won. And Monday.com won by a landslide, and it wasn't the cheapest by far. In fact, there were a couple of things that we as an open source company had access to for free, and we still chose to pay for Monday.com. And I still am very, very grateful to this day that we chose to do that because the clients love it. Like they enjoy it. They like it. I don't have any problem getting anyone to onboard. I don't have any problem getting anyone to use it. And that is priceless. And it's so flexible. Like we have everything that you do for a customer or internally for your own company, it can become what they call a board. Just think of a board as a space, like a project, right? And every single one of those can be 100% customized. So like we have boards. I have boards to do everything from tracking vacation time to tracking pre-sales, internally and a bunch of marketing work and stuff like that. We have boards for clients for them to submit blog publication. We have boards for clients to submit all kinds of project support tasks and everything else. And, we mostly serve B2B, right? So as a B2B business, we need to be able to have often like 5, 10, 15 clients logging into the same thing. And that is easy. Monday gives you unlimited guests. So there's no like additional cost when they say, hey, I want you to add this guy from this department on. I'm like, okay, it's no problem. But I mean, really what it boils down to is if you can get people to use something, that right there is the whole battle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, luckily Monday ended up being the thing that met everything we wanted. And by the way, everyone loves it. And I mean, it was expensive in my eyes, but not unreasonable for a small business. But it really matters that people will use it. My employees like using it. My clients like using it. Everybody gets their own private little support email. They can send a message to that and it goes right into their board automatically and everything. It's got every task has got like its own little chat feature, so to speak, on the side where you can have communication. It's just so easy to manage stuff in there and so flexible and so adaptable for whatever we need to do. And, if you pick something else that's cheaper, but people don't want to use it and you're constantly having to pull teeth and drag people kicking and screaming to log in, it's not worth it. I don't care whether you save $200 a month. It isn't worth it. So the fact that everyone loves it and the fact that everyone actively uses it, and the mobile app and everything else that they've got, is just definitely check it out. And I will tell you that I am paid nothing by Monday, by the way. I'm not an affiliate. I'm just a really loyal fan. And so I will tell you that if anybody wants to contact me with the links and stuff you'll share on the podcast and ask a question about Monday, I am happy to answer it, because if I can save other people from the hassles of the other tools, I am all over that.
Speaking of which, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they?
Well, certainly our website is an easy way to do it, polishedgeek.com.
Okay.
And then my email is deb@polishedgeek.com. And then I'm also pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. If you search for Deb Cinkus and the last name is Cinkus, I'm the only one you're going to find. So my name's pretty unusual there. So that's easy to get a hold of me. And then the other tool that I wanted to share with you, this is again for remote work, but it really makes a big difference. You've got to get as visual as you can, like all the time. When you're communicating something, get as visual as you can. Send a screenshot, do a quick little video clip, do a screenshot with the annotation, do something to make sure that the wrong assumption isn't being made, the misunderstanding isn't happening, and it just speeds things up, and the customers really appreciate it. When instead of you writing back saying, go log here, 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 and here, then go look for this field, take a minute and do a short little video clip, record yourself doing it, and they will thank you profusely. And the thing that we use for that, a lot of people use Loom. That's very good. What we use is Cloud App. And I really like Cloud App a lot. Super flexible, integrates with a lot of things. So I would suggest that, the picture worth 1,000 words is a truism for a reason. It makes a big difference when you're communicating, especially remotely. Get visual.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything else we'd like to discuss before wrapping up.
This is great.
I don't think so. Yeah, this has been great. I really appreciated the conversation. And I think it's been really interesting to hear some of your experiences as well, working in some of the same challenges that we've dealt with.
Yep. I'm always interested in hearing other people have the same issues as me, and that way I don't feel alone. So, great. Well, thank you so much, Deb. Thank you so much, Charles. And I guess we'll see you guys in another episode.
Yep. Max out, everybody.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Charles. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.